Welcome back everybody to another comic video. And today we're going to be talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. As you know by now, the trailer dropped about 3 weeks ago, and we're going to talk about the key issues and some specs. The market has now had time to react, adjust, and overall just getting more data for what the numbers look like going forward for some of the books. As you can see behind me here, I do have some of the spec books, key issues that we're going to talk about, especially the Special Marvel Edition number 15, his first appearance. So let's take a look. Okay, the first book we're going to take a look at is Master of Kung Fu, issue 29, first appearance of Razor Fist. This is a book that wasn't on anybody's radar, so we don't have that much data to go off of. But before the trailer dropped, it was at $39 for raw sales, and after the trailer dropped, it increased to $46 for a small 18% increase. We don't have any CGC sales reported for anything pretty recent because, like I said, this wasn't on anybody's radar. It is a Bronze Age book, so it is kind of old, but there are some high-grade copies out there. But there are only 62 copies that have been graded on the census. And I suspect that as the movie gets closer, that number will increase because people will be submitting their copies to CGC. Okay, the second book we're looking at is Master of Kung Fu issue 115, the first appearance of Death Dealer, who is a villain as well as Shang-Chi's trailer when he was younger. And before the trailer dropped, raw sales were going for about $34, and then after the trailer dropped, it increased to $77 for a nice 126% increase. Now, we don't have much data on the CGC sales, much like issue 29, but we do have some to report. There was a 9.6 that sold back in March for $100, and then a 9.8 that also sold in March for $125. That's such a great value going into the movie right now. $125 for a 9.8 is amazing. And you can see it because after the trailer dropped, there was a 9.4 that sold in late April for $335, and then that 9.6 sold for $332 in late April as well, for an increase of 232% for that 9.6. It's interesting to note that there are only 25 copies of this on the CGC census. Much like issue 29, we don't have that many to go off of to get our data, but I suspect this one will increase dramatically because Death Dealer is probably the main villain, whereas Razor Fist is only a secondary villain. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with Mandarin, but this should be the main book when it comes to the villains, out of the two at least, that will increase both in value and CGC graded comics. Now, this next book we're going to take a look at has been undervalued, underappreciated for a long time, ever since that, at least in my opinion, the debacle of Iron Man 3, Tales of Suspense, issue 50, the first appearance of Mandarin. This is a Silver Age book. It's a key villain first appearance issue in the Marvel Comics universe, and it is an archenemy of Iron Man. So this should be more valuable than it is, but he's kind of been forgotten, so to speak. Because of that, we don't really have that much data to go by when it comes to sales. But the current raw values on this are about $352, which is pretty high, but it is a Silver Age book and it is a key villain issue, so maybe it's not so high. There are a total of 652 CGC graded copies in the census, so there really isn't that much considering this is a key issue for a villain's first appearance. But anyway, for the CGC numbers, in March, there was a 4.0 that sold for $375, and it is now up to $495 in April for an increase of 32%. And for a 5.0 that sold back in December for $500 is now up to $1,110 in May for an increase of 122%. Keep in mind, these have been sold after the trailer has been released, so at least we know that people are paying attention to this. I expect this to keep going up as the movie gets closer and the trailers keep coming out, more information, and who knows if Mandarin becomes more of a staple in the MCU. Hopefully they don't just kill him off, because they can really do some stuff with the 10 rings. Now we get to the main event, the book that the movie is based around, Special Marvel Edition number 15, the first appearance of Shang-Chi. This is a Bronze Age book and one of the few characters that haven't made their way to the MCU or any other kind of live action movie. It's basically him and Moon Knight, and you can see Moon Knight's really going up. Morbius was on there, but we're gonna see that movie. But anyway, the numbers for this before the trailer dropped, the raw sales were $322, which is a pretty good number considering Shang-Chi hasn't really been in anything and he has been utilized, but it shows the potential of this character because as you can see in all the superhero movies, there's very little or if any Asian superheroes. So he'll be kind of the first tentpole of that caliber. Anyway, after the trailer dropped, it jumped up to $551, which is a really good number and has increased by 71%. And looking at the near mint class of CGCs, back in February, there was a 9.4 that sold for $1,807, and in April, a 9.4 sold for $2,939 for an increase of 63%. And then we have a 9.6 that sold in February for $2,979, and there was an increase in May of that 9.6 for $4,828 for an increase of 62%. And now here's the big one. February, a 9.8 sold for $7,500. And then there were two sales in April of a 9.8 that averaged $13,958 for an increase of 86%. That is a crazy number. It has now reached the $10,000 mark. And there are only 642 near mint copies, which are 9.4s and up on the census. So this should be a blue chip book going forward if the movie does well. And now I have a spec book that I think is related to Shang-Chi, which could possibly play a role later on, and that is Marvel Premiere number 15, the first appearance of Iron Fist. They have a lot of ties together. They were actually created similar, they're just a couple years apart. So this is a Bronze Age book. Raw sales for this right now are pretty affordable. They're at $120. I expect that to increase once the hype and speculation start to come around to the Shang-Chi movie and onwards. But looking at some CGC sales to take a look at where the trends are, there was a 7.5 that sold in April for $337, and then in late April it sold for $528 for an increase of 57%. And then there was a 8.0 that sold in April for $405 and has now increased to $781 in late April as well, for an increase of 93%. And then in March, there was a 9.0 that sold for $720, and then late April, it sold for $900 for an increase of 25%. And finally, early April, there was a 9.4 that sold for $1,200, and then just in May, just earlier in this month, a 9.4 sold for $1,776 for an increase of 48%. Keep in mind, again, that all of the CGC sales that have increased were after the trailer was released. So you could see that people are kind of getting behind the spec behind this because everybody would like to see Iron Fist versus Shang-Chi. But you could see the trend is going upwards on this book, which is another one of those books, much like Tales of Suspense number 50. It kind of cooled off, went down a little bit after the failure, I guess you could say, of the Netflix Iron Fist series. So if the MCU brings him back in, either recast him or do something just to put him back in, this could be another book that increases. Okay, so looking at these 5 books going forward, these are all going to be holds if you have them, buy if you don't, because the hype around Shang-Chi is real. Should be a pretty good movie from the looks of it. And all of these should be going up. 3 of these are probably blue chips going forward. I would sell the Master of Kung Fu 29 and number 115 after the movie releases or during the week of the movie, because I don't see Death Dealer and Razor Fist being more than 1 movie or maybe 2 movies. They are, all of these are bronze, silver, or copper books, but if you can get those high-grade CGCs for these Master of Kung Fu books, I would hold on to them until it gets closer and then just try to dump them and try to maximize your profits, because I don't see these holding in the long term, because these are just B-list, C-list villains. And when it comes to Tales of Suspense number 50, like I said, this to me is a blue chip Silver Age villain book, key issue. Maybe they will utilize him further. Either way, Mandarin is a huge character in the comics. So this is one of those that's even after the movie's done and they're done with them, this is still going to hold just because it's a key issue for a big time villain. And then obviously Marvel Special Edition number 15 and Marvel Premiere number 15. These are the blue chips of Bronze Age as well. You know, they're not on the same level as Hulk 181 or Werewolf by Night now, Tomb of Dracula 10, stuff like that, because they aren't as big as those characters. But if the movie does well, Shang-Chi will be on that level, much like Falcon and Winter Soldier has elevated Falcon, you know, Sam Wilson, into that A-list blue chip tier when it comes to his character in the show and his first appearance issue. Because his first appearance issue, Captain America number 117, has just, you know, it's just on a trajectory that's just going all the way straight to the moon. And I see Marvel Special Edition and Marvel Premiere heading on that direction. So these are long-term holds. I feel like Shang-Chi will be a franchise that they can go to over and over again. Hopefully I'm not wrong, because, you know, there's a lot of hype and hope around that movie.